And so I just want to go over a couple of things. So you're going to notice that this webinar allows you to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. I'm just going to ask that you keep your microphone on mute for the duration of the presentation, but we do welcome you to raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask a question at any time throughout the presentation. And we'll make sure to call on you and get your question put out there. You're also allowed to use that chat feature, as you guys have already been using here, to also ask questions. We'll keep an eye on the chat and make sure that your question gets over to Sandra. Still pulling some more people in here. Gonna give it another minute or so.
Sorry to jump in, Matt. I just want to make sure I saw someone in the chat say that they can't hear anything. Is anyone else having that issue?
Oh.
Can everyone hear us? Okay. I'm seeing some good signs. Perfect.
All right, I see a lot of yeses. Okay, good. Thank you for noting that. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm glad that everyone can hear. I think everybody is in here, and obviously, if you log out and need to join back in, we'll make sure to get you back in this as soon as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and start to kick things off here. So hello and welcome to Jobs in Our Future of Work, the BGS Advantage webinar in partnership with IE University. I want to take a second to highlight BGS's relationship with IE and the scholarship they offer exclusively to our members. IE has been associated with BGS since 2015, and they welcome all BGS members to their full-time master's degree program with a scholarship that covers up to 15% of the tuition. You can find out more by visiting the IE University page on our website. So it is my privilege to be able to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Sandra Comas. She's currently a visiting professor at Brown University and an IE Business School professor. Sandra discusses topics of leadership culture, social impact, and creative business thinking. She's also a consultant and speaker who has worked with many companies, including PricewaterhouseCoopers, Adecco, Kempinski Hotels, IPG Media Brands, Gotham Asset Management, and many more. For 10 years, Dr. Comas has specialized in finance, working at Morgan Stanley Smith Barney and TIAA-CREF, managing $1 billion in portfolios and achieving #1 in client relations. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sandra Comas to the virtual stage.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to meet you. And I'm excited for our session this morning, or afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're from. Clap back to you as well. For those who put up their clap sign, I wanted to go ahead and just ask you what it is that you seek to learn in today's session. So feel free to write in the chat if you like, or communicate with any of our facilitators here. And go ahead and just share your thoughts about what you would like to learn today, if you would like to. And as we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And you should see now the PowerPoint that we're going to be using for today's session. And so feel free to go ahead and speak to all of us. Maria Claudia, you want to share a thought about what you're looking for today?
Yes, I'm interested in knowing how to communicate with other people that new technology has come around so many times, and we don't need to be afraid of it. We just need to know how to incorporate it and make our jobs easier for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, we will discuss that as we enter into the world of work, but you have highlighted a critical area that we've had so much technology that has enabled and changed the scale of our communications and also the possibility for miscommunication, that it's very important for us to have mastery and understanding of our mode of communication. So we will bring that up. Thank you very much, Maria Claudia. Michael, please go ahead. Michael, you're on mute. I'm not sure if you know that, but if you'd like to share a question or a thought, please go ahead and do so.
Sorry, I've got the wrong second. Sorry. Let's go ahead.
Michael, it's a little bit difficult for me to make out what you were saying. I don't know if you want to write in the chat or open up the mic again and state it for everyone to hear. And our facilitators, if you find this on the chat or something to share. Okay, Michael, I will go ahead, but please feel free to go ahead and write in the chat, because we can bring anything that you'd like to share into our discussion. We're glad to see you. I'll go ahead and start in. And as we go along, as our facilitators and all members of our community today, please feel free to go ahead and ask any questions, take the microphone, and interrupt at any time. So I'll just begin with this question for you. What have you seen changed in your work? What do you see changing in your work? What do you see changing in the way you work, in the way in which people are hired, the way in which we think about our workplace and our teams? What are you noting in your own workplace? And again, feel free to go ahead and answer by speaking or by answering in the chat if you prefer. Daniela, so I see that you've written that you'd like to know about the future of business in the healthcare industry. Please go ahead. Somebody just opened their mic. Did you want to share something? All right, James, I don't know if you wanted to say something or not. I just I saw some movement there, but
no, I just turned it on so I could join in when I needed to. The industry I'm in is state. I'm working in Maryland for the prisons, and with the plethora of state laws currently in place, it is moribund, to say the least, compared to what private industry is doing.
That's very, very good. And we will speak to that. Remind me during the session if we don't pick it up. Just go ahead and remind me.
Sure.
Thank you very much, James. And thank you for bringing that into our session today. Ahmed, absolutely critical that we are hyper-connected. And so there is an issue of balance of personal and life and career. And maybe we can speak to that also in the session today. Yes, of course, there have certainly been layoffs and changes in hiring. Pat, thank you for bringing that. And if you have a further question on that, feel free to share it. I'm sure that our friends who are with us can bring that to our attention. Healthcare, just Daniela, to respond quickly, is probably one of the areas that is most in a state of change. And the changes in healthcare technology are massive. Our entire technology with regard to medicine is going to change radically in 10 years, and some areas even before, and that will have a huge impact on the way in which we bring healthcare to different people. Also, the increasing urbanization of all of our countries is going to have a massive impact on healthcare, its availability, and its quality. Richard, you're writing in here in the chat that we have siloed departments that adopt tech based on their needs and not on the needs of other departments. We can bring in there the case of Microsoft and discuss this. And it's very important to see, as some of our companies become what we call mega corporations, the differences among different areas of the corporation can be very significant. And we have seen a fragmentation and a siloing of many of these very large companies as they become extremely verticalized and are adapting new forms of matrix models. And so these are also real considerations for the future of work. I will just say here that there's going to be one macro change in the way in which we work. We're going to look at some of the elements of the new future of work according to Microsoft and their 5 years of research on changes in the work landscape, a research project that they began around the time of the beginning of the pandemic. And they have, along with The Economist and with McKinsey, perhaps done the most significant research on what we can expect to see in the new future of work. Our conversation today is based primarily in these reports. They are available in the bibliography to this PowerPoint. I'm happy to share that through our friends here online with us. But certainly we can see that the changing in workspaces, workplaces, notions of what constitute work, what constitutes an office, how we are able to integrate new technologies and integrate changes in communication. This is going to significantly impact the future of work. We have to recognize that if you look at a picture of the floor of the Gigafactory for Tesla, or you look at an image of the workhouse floor for building the SpaceX spaceships, you will note that there are no people present on these work floors. People have already been completely replaced by automation. And so another one of the main areas that we need to discuss and think about today is what is the impact of automation in our industry, in our specific workplace, and in our preparation for the jobs coming now and into the future for which we would like to be prepared. So have a quick look at this diagram, if you will. And this is a diagram that talks about some of the primary areas that we can expect to be impacted in the next even 5 years with regard to our work. And this diagram and our thinking brings us to 3 questions for our reflection. Number 1, what do you think is the new future of work? On the basis of your experience, what you're seeing, what you're reading, focusing on your own area of work, like James, for example, for you, you're making a distinction between the public and the private immediately. How does that impact, for example, the new future of work with which you're engaged? And this question can be asked by all of us. Number 2, how can we prepare, those of us who've taken the time to prepare for today's session or come to today's session or who will listen to the recording of today's session, how can we prepare for this future? And finally, what is our role as leaders who are going to be carrying out changes in our teams, in our organizations, and potentially even in our industries? For those of us who will be having 3rd and 4th careers in our lives, something that will be absolutely not only possible, but probable, what is the most important set of takeaways that we can have for preparing not only for the future of the work we're currently doing, but the future with regard to careers that we may not even envision today, but which will become a mainstay for our work life 10 years from now or 20 years from now? Does anybody want to respond to any of these questions or make a comment about the diagram? Feel free to do so. All answers here are good and all are correct.
One of the challenges I see in my particular industry, at least working with the prisons, in that there's a lot of movement towards remote work and all the automation involved, but we have yet to see how we can manage to run a prison without staff actually being here 24/7 at one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and imagine if you would, James, start to imagine how automation might potentially impact and even potentially be either a partial or full resolution to that question. Very interesting. Thank you. Claudia?
Hi, everybody. I think that artificial intelligence is going to replace many actions for the employers, or maybe you can see in chatbots, or maybe the future is in the metaverse, NTF, that kind of things that I think that is going to replace the actions. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Oh, that's very, very helpful. Thank you very much, Claudia. If we just look quickly at this diagram, we see some of the main topics that interest us all. One is, how are our strategies going to change? Our business strategy, for example, that could be the strategy for the business as a whole, or a strategy for a product, or a strategy for developing new products. It could be a strategy for how we want to impact the society around us, whether it's our local community, or the community of all of our current clients, or the community of the world as a whole. So the notion of strategy is going to be very much changed by changing workforces, changing workspaces, and significant changes in technologies and tools that are available to us. If we look at topic 2 of talent planning, which we'll talk about again in a moment, are the skills that have been important for us today going to continue to be the same set of skills that will be important to us in the future? And I'm going to suggest that there's going to be one fundamental difference, and I'll just say it right here for everyone to begin to consider. What is it that machines can do that human beings perhaps cannot? Or what is it that human beings can do that perhaps machines cannot? And if we can answer these questions, we can start to understand what is going to happen with talent planning. What will be the most important skills and talents that people will seek? Or perhaps more importantly, what will be the combination of skills and talents that will be most in demand and most necessary for the jobs as we go into the future? How will people be interviewed? What will be the factors that are going to be most relevant? If we go to learning and innovation, does anybody imagine a company today that does not have to be focused on learning and innovation? Several of you, I'm sure, are involved in companies and in industries that are not noted for being change agents. They may be industries or areas of work that are not as open to change, or may not be as quickly impacted by these changes. These are all ways in which we can think, but today more than ever, and your presence here today proves this, today more than ever, a learning culture is essential for every single workplace, which is to say, it is not only what we learn that is important, but just simply the fact that we are interested in learning. Because our interest in learning shows that we have curiosity, and curiosity drives organizations today and will continue to drive organizations in the future. And those organizations that are not curious about better ways to do things and different ways to organize their organizations, and new ways to develop cultures, new ways to evaluate people's performance, new ways to consider the ways in which we serve our clients, those people who are not focused on innovation and change will watch the world change around them without necessarily being able to benefit from those changes. And they may relegate themselves to being left behind, not only in their industries, but in their communities and in their opportunities to help people. And David, absolutely, we're going to discuss in a minute AI. AI is a game changer. If a number of years ago, the internet completely and the access to the internet completely changed the world. The presence and the continuous changing of artificial intelligence is the next big change already upon us that many believe is not only as big a difference and big a change as the invention and access to the internet, but many are conjecturing now that AI will be at least as important as the invention and access to the internet. And so this is extremely important for us to understand. Andres, thank you for your comment in the chat. And it's not only, I would say, it's not only that learning and innovation is a must. It's we have to recognize that this is in human nature. We always are making new things. People are always making new tools. People are always working on new technologies. People are always wanting to win. What I would challenge you, Andres, to think about is in this new period of work, is our notion of winning the same as what it has been before? In other words, I'm going to put a word here in the chat, if I can, which is co-opetition. And I'm going to go ahead and send this out to everybody. And this is a relatively new concept that in the new world of work, if we take an example, an old example of Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Pepsi and Coca-Cola famously, if you study the business case, absolutely were enormously helpful to each other in building each other's revenue streams. They had kind of an agreement about who was going to go after what markets, and then they changed those markets. And over a long period of time, they made themselves the best known form of quote unquote soda. And that is an example for us of co-opetition. In the world today, is there a co-opetition, for example, between Disney and Pixar? And has that co-opetition come from what was at one time a pure competition? Does this make sense to people? Are there ways in which companies are going to develop new partnerships and new capabilities of which they were not capable before, because at least in certain markets or in certain products or in certain services, companies may join together without necessarily an acquisition or a buyout, but simply as a kind of partnership. And we see this occurring between many, many companies, and it's something for us also to consider. Let's go ahead forward from here. I just want to finish working these out, that we will see changes in business strategy, talent planning, learning and innovation. Our work environments, which we'll talk about now, have radically changed. And then very importantly, and you can make a big note of this, and Amazon is looking at it today, Starbucks is looking at it today, organizations all around the world. What is the pact or the implicit or explicit agreement between people who work at a company and the senior leadership of that company? During the period of the pandemic, we saw great changes in what is expected of our companies. And we see this in every single industry. But we'll use Amazon simply as an example. Were the workers at Amazon complaining about mistreatment before the pandemic? Was this a big news item? Or did this become really critical when frontline workers at Amazon discovered that some of them were getting sick with COVID and some of them even dying because they were not given breaks, because they were not enabled to distance themselves from each other in the workplace or distance themselves from clients as they went and made deliveries? And we saw that Jeff Bezos, as he left being CEO of Amazon, added 2 principles to his guiding principles for the company. Both of them focused on employees and employee relationships. And with that, he also left the day-to-day CEO job of the company, leaving the difficulties and challenges of relationships with employees to a new leadership, and he has not been responsive to it. So I just share some of those thoughts very quickly. Any comments on these? Is this hitting home with some of you, or does it seem like this is, we're talking about something that's even beyond Elon Musk's Mars spaceships? All right, let's continue on our journey here. A few of the objectives here, just to kind of point this out, is to understand the increasing value given to innovation, the importance of looking at not only our business context, but also our historic context. Historic not only in terms of the development of extraordinary technologies like artificial intelligence, but also history in terms of political history. What's going on in the political history of the moment? What do societies around the world crave or need? What are the kinds of innovations that we already see on the horizon for which we're going to need to adapt, both in ourselves and in our work? And then if we look below on this slide, I would just ask you to have a quick look at number one, what motivates us and what's going to continue to motivate us in the new future of work. Are we going to continue to desire to have some level of independence, an opportunity to become great at what we really like doing and what we're good at doing and what we like to learn about doing? And are we going to be working with a sense of purpose? Are there going to be challenges to the changes and people who will resist them and make them much more difficult for us to lead through? And how will the increasing diversity in multiple ways and the increasing need for innovation and the increasing effects of social impacts of our work, how will all of these matters also impact the new future of work? So I just wanted to share that with you as kind of a more sort of global set of larger questions for us as we now go a little bit more deeply into some of the changes that we're going to be thinking about. Have a look at this slide and just read it through. And then if you want to speak to it, just go ahead and write something in the chat, or please go ahead and just raise your hand to speak. For that matter, you can just go ahead and speak.
One question I have is how to work the knowledge of the new technology along with redefining the way you need to serve others in your work, you know? What I mean is that if you don't modify and redesign your business purpose and how you are serving your customers or providing your services, putting on top technology in all ways, cannot move you in the change of technology as you need it. I don't know if
I'm not
that...
sure I fully define your question, Maria Claudia, but I think that I'm going to respond this way, and you can let me know if this is responsive to your question. It is, of course, extremely important for people to learn new technologies as they may relate to that person's work or that person's area of responsibilities. But what we're going to be seeing now as we go forward in our discussion today is to consider what is it that changes in the culture of the workplace or the culture of the relationship with our clients that changes because of technology. Yes. And therefore, what changes in what we as people are being asked to provide that technology does not provide. Does this make sense to you? And so one of those areas, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is we have a capacity for adaptation and creative thinking that is increasingly important. The power of our imagination, the very imagination that invented AI and that built the technological tools for AI, is the same powerful engine of humanity. Our imagination, our creative ability is going to become increasingly important, both for creating the proper context for use of the technology, training in the technology, and then collaboration in the workplace across hybrid and highly global environments, because machines cannot undertake those tasks. Does this make sense to you, Maria? And so those areas in which the human being and the human heart and the human capability is not replicated by artificial intelligence or other forms of technology, those areas have significantly increased in importance in hiring. And when I speak with people in different organizations, they find it incredibly difficult to find elite talent who's highly capable and able to learn how to learn, because they know that people and new technologies are going to be coming along. But it's hard to find those people with those capabilities who also are great with people, great in providing a good work environment, great in understanding what it is that people today seek from their employer and from the workplace that they may well not have sought 5 years ago. And also the generational changes, which are very significant. We have a massive influx of younger people who have grown up with technology and who also have grown up with different expectations of the workplace and their employer. So all of these are impactful. Maria, I don't know if that's a full answer to your question, but I hope it's helpful.
It certainly is, because you touch up on a point that you need people that is good with technology and good with people at the same time.
Exactly. And so, in other words, what I'm saying in sort of a broader sense is the areas in which we need to develop our intelligence are changing. If when each of us was growing up, people would talk to us about, for example, our IQ, if you said, how smart are you? That just meant like, what is your intellectually measurable capability, right? But today, just as we're talking about new technologies, the study of human beings, the study of our brains, the study of how our brains work, neuroscience, the study of our physical bodies, the study about human life has radically advanced over the last 30 years. There's been massive experimentation in all of these questions. And so it's extremely important to understand both what human beings need to thrive and to feel highly motivated and to give their best and to work well with each other and to greet conflict and to meet conflict. All of that requires tremendously important intelligence, but maybe that's not intellectual intelligence alone. Maybe that includes what we call a combination of intellectual and emotional intelligence. Maybe that includes cultural intelligence, our understanding about culture. Maybe it includes a kind of technological intelligence, our ability to be able to work with machines. Maybe that has to do with our social intelligence. How are we dealing with a team that is fully remote and connects to 120 countries and enters 200 different markets, for example? Do you see what I'm saying? So that we can expand even our notion of what it is to be smart and what it is to be intelligent and what are the capabilities we associate with those. So maybe that's a longer answer, Maria, but I hope that is helpful. What we can see from this slide is that in 60% of all work today, and this has already changed since I first had a look at these numbers, an average of 30% of people are going to find that their work is automated. Almost all frontline workers and all people who have less skilled jobs are going to find that their skills are going to be taken over by automation. And this is potentially a significant social impact. And so we in our companies also can design the social impact that we seek in this period of automation to be able to diversify our workforce, bring in people we might not ordinarily have brought in, and offering kinds of training and education to help build those people for our workplaces. In the Wall Street Journal, they've recently published a report that 92% of all employers were now saying that soft skills, which I consider to be the hardest skills to learn, which is those skills that teach us how to lead people, how to inspire people, how to set the direction in the workplace, how to create a sense of purpose in joined work. All of this is incredibly important, and perhaps even more important now than ever because of hybrid working, because of different concepts of workspaces, and because the younger generation has different expectations of what is going to be their opportunity to work in a workplace with others. Finally, we can see that the numbers of people who are going to be increasingly working with these quote unquote soft skills is going to radically change the workplace. I bring in just for a quick moment this citation. Go ahead and read this. This is from the 18th century Swiss philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and have a quick look at it and see what you think about it. Yes, Yannick, the ways in which tests are going to be testing people for jobs, I mean, this has already changed. That's already changing, and also the performance evaluations are already including new categories that have never existed before, like collaboration on some performance evaluations, leadership on some as well. Well-being is a big one that has been added to scorecards and performance evaluations, and managers are increasingly held to task for those. Annabelle, I don't know if the newer generations are less emotional, but it is clear that this generation has grown up in a different time. It's been a time that has included a lot of real sources of uncertainty and instability in global instability, not the least of which was the pandemic itself. And they have grown up with technology. If you ask them to write something down, they pick up their phone. They don't pick up a pen and take a piece of paper. And so we have to understand that they may not be less human, and they're the most connected, networked generation in the history of the world by far. But they may be better able to deal with the non-humanizing aspects of work like automation and large-scale communication simply because they're more accustomed to it. So thank you very much for those points here. I'll just make a quick thought here. We all have a social contract in our lives. We have perhaps a social contract with the people in our families, in our immediate communities, in our workplaces, with our countries, for example, and those may be implicit or explicit promises. But one point that we know is, and Rousseau did a book on this called The Social Contract, is that human beings are animals. We work in groups, we live in groups, and therefore we have to have some sort of rules or process by which we work and live together. And as leadership, we need to be considering what sort of relationships we want to create, and what structures and what aspects of our group culture, what decision-making processes are we going to provide? What knowledge do we have our customers that's going to enable us to make a kind of social contract with all of our stakeholders? And I bring this in because if Rousseau was describing in a period of quote unquote enlightenment, everything that had happened in a period of intense exploration and colonization around the world, and the development of countries that owned other countries and the opportunities of those countries, leading to what we call the Industrial Revolution, and now to today, to a new world of incredible technologies. What is it that we are willing to accept in our social contract with our employers? Do we expect them to provide training? If so, what kind of training? How much of our time? How much time are we expected to be in meetings, and are those meetings valuable to everybody who's in the meetings? What is our workplace providing to us that enables us to develop our leadership and to develop the ability to bring out more in the people with whom we're working and make the workplace a place that uses all of the good of technology and also keeps what is needed of the human? And we are in a new time when we can rethink these social contracts. And so as we're discussing here today, everything that is changing, let's also think about what is not changing. The need for human beings and the needs of human beings are not really changing in an important way. We all need to work with people who are responsible, who are reliable, who are team players, who, when they see a problem, think about, how can I solve that problem? Whom do I need in the room with me to best solve that problem? How do I communicate effectively? What is my network of communication, and who should be in that network for meeting this particular project or this particular challenge? And are these capabilities transferable across different industries? Because increasingly our work is cross-cultural, cross-industrial, cross-intellectual, all of these things. Having just a quick look at AI, the AI is going to provide future work assistance. And those, I see a typo here, so I'll fix that in a moment. And AI is going to be used to enable tasks of all kinds with all different kinds of software. And it is designed to imitate human thinking, human action, human workflow, while facilitating interactions and our communications. Let me ask you this question. In your view, what is the most important innovation of the last 500 years? I put up here the examples of Tesla and Twitter and ultimately SpaceX. But what do you think? Just, you can write it in the chat. What do you think is the greatest innovation in your lifetime or in the last 500 years? How has it impacted you and impacted the world? Go ahead and take a moment to just write something in the chat if you like. Yeah, the internet is huge. Can you even imagine that when I first started to use a computer, I'm not saying this to date myself, I'm just saying this. Can you imagine when I bought my first computer, the internet didn't exist? I would think most people here cannot even imagine that that computing existed without the internet. And when I was first asked, I was in a leadership position at the university at Yale, and I was asked by my boss to please communicate with her by email. We were using HTML code to write an email. There was no user-friendly language for email at the beginning. And then the internet developed. I've had to learn. If I were to tell you all of the different kinds of languages, and I'm not, computer language person that I've had to use just for purposes of communication, You would all like not believe it, but you will all go through the same thing. You're going to go through the same evolution. It's just going to be a different evolution because the technologies of communication are going to continue to change. Manuel, you grew up on dial-up. Well, I did too. Exactly. And there was no such thing, if anybody can imagine. I mean, there was just even creating a long cord for the dial-up was considered to be a huge innovation, that you didn't have to stay close to your phone. So we can look back at the history of the last 20 years and see, for most of you, you're saying the internet, the web is the greatest invention of the last 500 years. I would just, for a purpose of just kind of historic context, imagine what it was like when the Enlightenment thinkers of the French and Swiss Enlightenment had an encyclopedia that they built. It was the first more popular, not popular, but more popular access to knowledge was the writing of the first encyclopedia, which was created by a group of philosophers in the French Enlightenment. And that was considered outrageous. What about the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg and his people? And there were other collaborators as well that printed Ptolemy's maps, what is called the Bible by some groups of people, and also an edition of Marco Polo's Travels, the first 3 works that were printed by the new printing press, completely changed the history of the world to see Ptolemy's ancient maps of the world inspiring an incredible exploration of the world. Marco Polo's Travels, which excited the taste for bringing East and West together for the first time in history for the purposes of commerce. And the Bible, which completely changed the notion of hierarchy, that people would no longer need to have other people telling them what an important book said, but they could read it for themselves. These were absolutely history-changing events. So we can speculate here and use our imagination to think about what is it that the internet has opened and what now artificial intelligence is going to radically change. One of the answers to that, and I just refer to Elon Musk here for a moment, one of the answers to that is just to look at the career of Elon Musk. PayPal, Neuralink, The Boring Company, Twitter, or X as it's known now, SpaceX, each of these companies from Elon Musk, and I haven't named all of them, right, has been an effort to generate new technologies and new ways of building. Elon Musk is the #1 expert in the world on manufacturing. Nobody knows more about manufacturing than Elon Musk. That is his great capability and his great learning. And if we look at that, we can see that just by even looking at the history of that one person, we see a current history of innovations. And we see that all of this is coming together for a new future and a new future of opportunity that is not limited by the boundaries of outer space. On the contrary, it is becoming the new frontier for business, international business, and for the interconnection of private business and governmental action. And we can speak more about that in the question and answer period. Just to kind of go through a few slides to introduce you to this report that that Matt has also a link to that has been shared, but you can go onto the Microsoft website and find this report. It's called The New Future of Work. It has been amended over time. It was recently amended, and it's an exceptional opportunity for understanding the world we're going into. So I'm just going to review a few of the forecasts that are in this work. If you want to have a look at it, you can look at it on the website, you can download it, and you'll find that the table of contents and index are incredibly helpful for finding whatever area you want to look at, so you don't have to read it straight through. It's a lot of learning here. Number one, we have a high level of experimentation in work models. If we look at the history of WeWork over the last 10 years, we can see the unpredictability and the high risk that organizations have been faced with regard to work models and workspaces. So are we going to continue with hybrid work? What is that going to look like? Is the new generation, the younger generation, going to demand to have an opportunity to work remotely or to work in the office only one day a week? How are we going to integrate on-site work, remote work, hybrid work? How are we going to integrate different kinds of pay structures that are associated with those different kinds of work? And what are alternate structures that we may be bringing in that we don't even conceive of yet that may vary considerably by industry? And what do we mean by experimentation? And this has a very specific sort of notion within science, and we can mimic that there is a process of creativity in which we bring people together with diverse voices and ways of thinking. We seek conflict in the point of view so that we can generate new thinking. We then have thoughts about how can we be agile in the thinking and also in the integration and implementation of an experiment on a small scale to test out our ideas and our points of view, and then build that into some sort of pilot and then bring out as an actual product or service. We are increasingly in a time in which all companies need to be engaging in serious experimentation in all areas of the company in order to be able to make changes on larger scales. The tech industry, we can see, is, and I've checked off one of the bullet points here. Yes, there's going to be great changes from artificial intelligence. There's going to be great changes in the internet. There's going to be different points of view about the socioeconomic values of work. But if we look here at the third bullet point, if we ask the question, what will the future of work look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? We might want to convert that question into what should the future of work look like? What do we need to imagine and materialize in order to get there? Because we are still in a period where we can reimagine the future of work and the uses of technology. As many of you know, the metaverse has captured the public imagination. Richard, thank you for your response about antibiotics. There's no question that healthcare has radically changed human life, not the least of which is that in your lifetime, many of you have the potential to live to be 120 years old. And without the changes in technology and healthcare and access to healthcare, we would not be even thinking about lifespans that were longer than what they were at the beginning of the 1900s, which was around the age of 40 around the world. We are well beyond that. We have doubled the life expectancy of most people on the planet. The metaverse is expected to significantly change the way in which we train people and will become an enormously valuable tool for education and for training of people. And we will see a great deal of use of this, but perhaps not in the way currently envisioned. According to this researcher, we can see that AI assistants are going to revolutionize work, as we saw a moment ago, where AI is going to be trained to take on all kinds of activities and tasks that people are currently doing now. And they give some examples here in the research of, we're not going to have to set our alarm clocks anymore, or our phones, or book flights, or even playing games. Everything is going to be able to be done through virtual assistants if we want it to be done. And this is going to free up millions, if not billions, of people from daily tasks And if you look at an imagined future, which is still in your lifetime, many people will find themselves with additional time for following their curiosities, engaging in leisure activities, being able to collaborate with co-workers, because many of the tasks that have occupied our lives for centuries are no longer going to be needed for these same people. Finally, we've talked about talent, and we started our session today with this. Talent is going to be highly competitive and will include both of these human capabilities, the uses of human forms of intelligence that are not replicable by machines, and combining these with specific areas of competency and knowledge. And this is going to make great changes in all areas. I see we also have an additional comment here about sanitation. This is huge. I would challenge everybody in the room today to consider each aspect of what we are discussing about the change in the future of work. How does that specific area impact different societies? How does that impact how we are able to meet the global challenges, for example, of climate change or inequality with regard to access to the internet itself? We can now divide the world between those people who have access to the internet and those who don't. There are billions of people without access to the internet. Those people cannot train for the new future of work. Those people cannot have access to all the different varieties of education that are now available to us. And theirs will change. Richard, this is a response to your point here in the chat. There may well be workload reductions, and there may be an increase of personal economic freedom. But how will that come to pass? What economic models or payment models may change? What may be different in the future about what governments provide and what we expect our companies to provide? Going back to the example of Amazon. In the pandemic, people expected Amazon to make medical help available, to make medicine available. And if we look at the benefits and the expectations of people around the world, many expectations of companies today are expectations that people used to have of their governments. And Ahmad, to your point, unquestionably, the notion of regulation is in a period of radical change. If we look at the recent meeting between Sam Altman and all of the heads of the largest technology companies in the West, we can see that competitors are meeting in private rooms in order to be able to see how they are going to try to control the main governments in the world for the purpose of determining or guiding the regulation. And because the technologists understand the capabilities of their technology and their companies so much better than anybody who works as a politician, will government be able to successfully regulate, or will government be subject to the regulation of the companies according to what those companies believe will be the best forms of regulation? Does this make sense to people? This is something that is going to evolve in practice, in designed regulation and legislation, by working it through and evolving it by seeing it, and by an education of government to be able to collaborate and work with its responsibilities to the society at large and to the needs of technology companies in their quest to employ more people and raise the quality of life of people around the world. These are just some examples. I don't mean to suggest that these are full answers to your questions. Finally, the notion of diversity and belonging, equality are incredibly important as we have more and more diverse workforces in more and more different kinds of work situations. It is incredibly evident to all of us at this point that we need to reimagine the business case for diversity. And this goes back to the question about what is it that human beings can provide that AI cannot, which is managing diversity, leading diversity, getting the best of the multiple voices, different points of view, different training, different experiences, and bringing in those voices in a management process. This is per the great writer and thinker Peter Drucker. All organizations require management today. It is the youngest of our sciences, but it is a science. How can we manage these changes so that we gain the positives of diversity and we learn how to better manage the challenges and difficulties that are presented to us by diversity? We also can redefine the categories of diversity, the categories of identity for this purpose. So to our friends here who are facilitating our session, I'm not sure if you want to go to questions and answers now, or if you'd like me to make one or two final comments, or if you'd like me to keep going, Matt. Maybe you can let me know what's on your mind here.
Yeah, I would like to open up the floor to some additional questions and things like that. I see a ton of activity in the chat here, a lot of people interacting and stuff like that. Again, if you're interested in asking a question, please feel free to raise your hand. You can come off mute and ask it out loud, or you can add it into the chat here, and we'll be monitoring it and facilitating the conversation that way as well.
I've just put a quick outline and summary of some of the ideas we've entertained here so that maybe that helps people to consider what questions they would like to bring in.
I do want to highlight one comment that was asked a little bit earlier during the conversation from Stephanie. She asked, will companies hire freelancers and contract workers? If so, what happens to confidentiality agreements and competition when workers are taking their skills and knowledge across various organizations?
Yeah, this is a really important question. Who asked it again, Matt?
This is Stephanie Bonde.
Stephanie, great question and really important one. One of the other aspects of the new future of work, which you have not brought up yet, is what we're calling the gig economy, where people might have multiple employers and be responsible for multiple projects. And this is increasingly true, not only in our youngest generation now entered the workforce, but also it is very much true for people who are in their midlife years and beyond, who have developed a kind of personal currency. They have developed skills. They have developed significant experiences. They may have worked at some major companies or had really significant job experiences. And they may now be working as contract workers, or they may have part-time contracts, and they may be working with multiple parties. And so, Stephanie, this is bringing us into the area of change. There is going to be a change. As we can see, we're in a period of radical change about our notions of privacy, radical changes in international law, and especially international employment law. For example, that's been highly relevant for IE University itself. IE employs so many people from outside of Spain, for example. They have had to work for years with the Spanish government to define and redefine ways in which working people will be treated by the university, even though they are not bound by the laws of the countries that those people may be resident in and largely working from. And so this is an area in which we're going to see a lot of rethinking and a lot of change. To the point of, we can come back to that. I don't know if that's fully answered for you, Stephanie, but this gig economy is growing. It's going to continue to grow, and it may even replace our traditional notions of full-time employment. Of course, none of that would be possible without technology and without the rapid acceleration of use of technology in the pandemic. David, I don't know if you're David or David, but David, to your point, and James, I'll be with you in a minute. David, to your point, I think that there's no question, at least in my mind, I don't know how quickly it will happen, but just as we have oftentimes seen people who have different areas of expertise come into government because government needed those areas of expertise, there can be no doubt that governments are going to need very important committees, if not whole departments, with regard to changes in legislation and rules for employment and for what is the relationship between employer and employer, employee and employer, and what are going to be the regulations and laws that people in the gig economy will be able to rely on. We've had huge problems in international law over recent years. You may or may not know that. There have been many challenges to international laws. Typically, those have been political challenges, but increasingly those are socio-economic challenges. And we have only to look at the case of Jack Ma in China and the period in which Jack Ma disappeared after having built the most powerful, the most profitable, and the most reliable company in the Chinese economy. Or we can think about Samsung, which provides 20% of the GDP to the economy of South Korea. How important are larger mega corporations to the well-being and stability of national governments and to the people who work in these companies or who are clients of these companies? So we can see that there's going to be change in all of these areas. And again, I come back to the point, we don't need to take the point of view that these are changes being brought to us, but that these are changes that we ourselves are going to be bringing about, accessing our own experience, our own imagination, and our own capabilities, and recognizing that we are needed to help to solve the new problems of this new future of work. Giorgio, please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks a lot for the presentation today. It was super interesting. I was thinking about the statistic that we saw earlier, that 92% companies, I believe, think that soft skills, if not more, at least as important as technical skills. And then that over 80% of companies still struggle though on finding the right talent, the right people that they need, or at least the right set of skills. And I wonder if that, do you believe that is because it's just there is no connection, the right level of connection between companies and schools, so people are trained on the right set of skills that are needed on the workforce? Or do you think it's more about there is just a gap, or like a misalignment on where the people are versus where the companies that need those people are?
I'll give a quick example, and I hope, Giorgio, this is a relevant example. All right. My father, who was from another generation, liked to tell the story. He was an aeronautical engineer, and he worked in space, you know, his whole career. And he was in the Second World War. He left college for the war. And when he came back from the war, he and all of his classmates discovered something that shocked them, which is that all of them knew more about aeronautical engineering than any of their professors did. Why? Because they had piloted the newest planes. They had navigated the newest planes. They had serviced the newest planes. And so they come back from the war, and all of these people with doctorates who were highly learned people could still teach, but they did not know the most recent technologies. They were not aware of them. They did not know how to use them. And so I come back to what I think is one of the core areas of your question, which is that education has been lagging behind the needs of the workplace and the changes in technology. And we have seen in the period of the pandemic to today a radical shift in education to become more and more oriented toward the practical needs of people who are going to be engaged in the tasks of today and into the future. And they have had to find ways to adapt earlier forms of learning to the needs of the learning and working environment today. So to your point, I think that companies are changing, and also that the talent that and the processes of seeking talent have very much changed today. I'll give a quick example. Netflix. One of the ways that Netflix was able to accelerate its growth and be the underdog with lesser capital that was able to remake the entertainment industry was because they were radically new in their hiring processes. And they started to look for different parts of the resume, and they did research on what showed them that people would be really good at a specific job. And I'll give an example that they used. One of the questions they would ask on their job application is, what do you use as a browser on your computer today? What browser are you using? And they found in that time period that those people who were using Chrome turned out to be much better employees for Netflix than people who were using Safari. This is just an example. They were starting to find, they start to look for unusual corroboration. I'll give another, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Another example, when I was applying for jobs on Wall Street, I got hired because I played the piano, not because I went to a fancy university or had multiple degrees and all kinds of job experience. The guy said, "You're the only one who has played the piano." And I said, "Well, why is that significant?" He said, "Because we find people who have learned how to play the piano have a direct correlation to being successful in our company." Right? And he cited, for example, daily discipline, hours a day over the course of your whole life, right? The ability of your brain to be interpreting all different pitches and all different kinds of chords. The piano has a vast array of percussive sounds and the impact that it has on the shaping and plasticity of the brain. I'm just citing two of the statements that he gave to me. I was shocked by this. By the way, I also really loved the job. And I think that ultimately that was right. But going back to Netflix for just a moment, and David, I'll ask you, and I know, James, that you had your hand up before, that Netflix found that those people who accepted the browser that was already uploaded onto the computer that they bought or were given, which is Safari, those people were less curious and less innovative than those people who looked into why they should download another browser and why they chose to use Chrome instead of the browser that was already part of their machine. And it just shows, and it's an important point, the power of curiosity. And it's my expectation that there's going to be increasingly complex and sophisticated ways to test people for their inherent curiosity and their ability to move curiosity to actually real world innovation or impact. James, I don't know if you still had a hand up, and David, if either one of you had something you wanted to ask, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is David. I wanted to just ask what your thoughts are on, because there are a couple of things that I was thinking about that you mentioned, and you said you gave your example of the piano, and then you also said the phrase "real world," and so I just wanted to get your thoughts on what the future of work looks like with regards to like analog abilities, analog skills. For example, brain surgery. Right, that we can probably assume that won't be replaced, but I wanted to get your thoughts on like physical sort of tactile skills and how that will play a part in the future of work?
Well, that's a great question, David. And so I guess we can call you David or David. So that's fine. Many of us will have multiple pronunciations of our names because we have a very diverse group here. But anything that relates to the human is going to increasingly be important. You know, AI doesn't have the 5 senses. We do. And you were talking about brain surgery, for example. One of the greatest improvements in healthcare today, the single greatest improvement, which is changing medicine, is our knowledge about genes and the ability to make changes in people's genes and thereby change the fate of their medical and health history. So this is the single greatest technological change in healthcare, and it's going to radically change healthcare. Another of the important points here is what can human beings do to increase equal access to those technologies and those areas that we know make the greatest difference in the quality of life and happiness. Yes. And so, for example, if in brain surgery, we can now bring in a robot. I've known tons of people now who have had operations that were completely done by robots. And those robots don't exist everywhere. But if you're in a place where those robots exist and you have, if we're in a place where robots exist and you have access, that's a complete game changer. And so my answer to that would be, what is the combination of human senses, sight, sound, touch, and so on, with the machines? That's going to be the area which is going to be the true game changer, where we take the best of the human, or what cannot be replicated by the machine, with the machine. That's going to be the game changer. I know we've run a little bit over, and so I just want to hand this back over to you, Matt, and if anybody else has further questions or comments, Matt, that will be up to you to determine if we go on with that from here, or if that's going to be held for another time when we all have the good fortune to being together.
Yeah, no worries. Well, I know people can find you on LinkedIn. Sandra, are you okay with us sharing your LinkedIn out to everyone so that they can connect with you there?
I'm delighted to make new friends always. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to drop that in the chat really quick. And then I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. It was fantastic having you all here, interacting in the chat, interacting, in person, well, at least face to face in a virtual setting, and really appreciate everyone here today. Thank you so much. And thank you very much, Dr. Sandra Comas, for joining us today and having this fascinating discussion. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your days, evenings, mornings, wherever you're at in the world. Thank you again, and take care.